The Chess Olympiad has already started and it's happening in Budapest, Hungary. It is not any less fun for those chess lovers and above all for the African continent. Here are some of the highlights from the Chess Olympiad. I could say from the African perspective, the Black Edition. Enjoy. So this is the game between Rakotomaharo and Dimitri Kollars, and I am from Madagascar versus a Grandmaster from Germany, board one. 200 elos apart, though 24 years old each. Yeah, so let's get to see what happens in the game. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4 and bishop C5, D3, knight F6. We get to see a normal Gioco Pianissimo game, means which is a quiet game, preparing it to be long. And after castles, D6, C3, A6, A4, castles, and here are some of the crossroads where quite a number of moves are possible. H3 was played, but decent is also bishop G4, bishop B5, bishop E3, knight from B to D2. They are all possible in the position, and they can give quite results. So H3 was played, and after bishop to A7, rook to E1, bishop to E6, knight from B to D2, with a plan which is a bit obvious. If the bishop probably takes, then they can take back with pawn, and that keeps the center held. The D5 break is no longer possible. Another move that is decent is knight takes, having some pressure on E5 and planning to eradicate the bishop, which is quite annoying on the long diagonal. So we get to see knight to H5. Well, a simple trick that maybe some people may not know is that the knight is not hanging after knight takes. This would be a blunder in the position because after queen H4, attacking the knight and the F2 pawn, the game is close to completely lost. Reason being, there is no good way to parry off any of the attack against the king. Well, if you play D4, then you lose the piece. If you play well, if you come back with a knight, it doesn't make it any better. I mean, you lose the pawn and you're probably going to lose the game later. Yeah, you lose the exchange and probably the game. So it's quite a challenging or hard position to play as white the moment you steal the pawn, because black will activate all the pieces and you're in trouble. So D4 was played, planning to fork, so something has to be done. Knight takes, pawn takes, and after knight takes D4, knight to H5. Well, now the knight was hanging. You cannot go for, say, nothing move. I mean, like the knight is hanging. So it's a must to react to it right now. And after knight to F4, knight takes bishop, pawn takes, and the knight is quite annoying on that position. Reason being, well, it's now defended by a rook which is on a semi-open file, a bit irritating for the king side. So you need to evict it as fast as you can. So after knight F3, king to H8, planning to probably push their pawn, bishop to E3, a move that was meant to be played to relieve pressure off that long diagonal. Queen to F6, and after king to H2, we get to see an exchange of the bishops with rook takes. Well, the rook takes is much better than pawn takes because, well, for starters, it kind of helps improve your position a bit better. Because when the knight just drops back, we get to see these pawns are ugly without compensation. Yeah, so rook takes E3, and after rook to F7, planning to triple up on the open file. Probably an Alekhine gun, but the other way around. I do not know what they call it if the queen heads the battery. Yeah. So bishop comes to F1, adding more defense to the king and to the pawns. Rook from A to F8, and after B4, G5. Well, G5 is a very beautiful move because it plans to distort the king side, which is something you still want to do anyway. Seeing that, well, they are quite solid enough on the king side, so you want to try to pressure as much as you can. So after B4, which is an attack on the other side of the board, Pawn takes, and after pawn takes, knight comes to e5. The exchange of the knights happens. Queen takes e4. King gets out of the pin. Knight to g6. Rook to a2. Well, rook to a2 is a very beautiful move, adding defense to the second rank. As you can see that the f pawn was under attack. No better way to defend it, seeing that the queen needs to keep an eye to the open diagonal, probably this square. The other move is that you don't want to block your bishop with a move like queen to e2, quite ugly. So rook to a2, which is a decent move. And after b6, queen to d4, planning to exchange the queens. Well, on black's terms, and after the exchange, king takes, rook comes back down. Well, the simple mind behind it is that you want to shift your rook to a more active square as this continues defending without you blocking the bishop. So knight comes to e5, f3, h5, rook comes to a7. Well, this is the start of an active plan. I mean, the game is still fine, though precision still needs to be taken because two rooks and a knight versus two rooks and a bishop, a lot can still happen. So we see g4, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight takes, and well, we get to see now the liquidation starting to happen. Bishop comes to c4, attacking the e6 pawn. Rook slides over to e7. Bishop comes back attacking the knight. Knight falls back. Then rook to d1. Rook to d1 is a decent move, avoiding the pawn break, which would add more play on the other side of the board or the other half of the board. So rook comes back to f7. Bishop attacks rook. Rook goes to d7. Rook to f1. Well, a wise choice indeed, because you would need to liquidate, seeing that that one of your rooks is on the back foot. Both of the rooks were active, most especially when they had a battery. So eradicating one of them kind of makes the job a bit simpler and probably preferable for the white camp, seeing that they have a bishop. So rook takes, king takes f1, and after king to f6, king to f2, rook comes to the g7 square, bishop falls back to e2, controlling the knight. Knight drops to g6, king marches forward to e3, king to e5, bishop to f3. Well, this is quite a solid position. Not much is happening, and not much can actually happen because it's typically balanced. Well, the king is well placed on e5, and so is the one that's on e3. There's not much to improve the pieces. Even when knight f4 was played, a simple move like c4 was played because, well, if the knight takes, then after the exchange of the pieces, you drop the backward pawn, and it's not enough. It's totally not enough to win the game. So I would say it's quite a fair result. The game ended in a draw after a few more moves because no one wanted to commit to exchange pieces. I mean, like at this kind of level, for IM5, who's been playing on the Africa Individuals Continental Championship, he clearly knows that the exchange wouldn't help, and so is Dimitri Kollars. So a few more moves were played, and a peaceful result was agreed. So it's not much that can happen in the position, since the rook that is on this side of the board is very active. It keeps pressuring the backward pawns. The pawns are well advanced, and above all, their rook is now, much as it's also pressuring a point, it's quite a defensive piece too, because the closer the pawns to the other rank, so the harder. So rook slides to e7, and after the check, rook to f7, rook comes back to c, rook to a7, bishop to e3, knight maneuvers again, Bishop goes back to f3. And after the little shuffle, well, we get to see that the position starts to resume. Not much was happening. And I believe it was indeed a decent result on either side of the board. So they chose to play it out this way. And after rook to c6, rook to f4 check, king to e3, rook to f6. Well, you cannot afford the exchange of the rooks because it might make your game harder. Uh, so a wise choice, which is rook to c8, was played. Pawn check, king to d3, rook check, king to c2. Well, this king is well placed to always defend against this pawn. The rook is also well placed to have checks at the back, which kind of holds the progress of the pawn. The other thing is that this pawn is a few moves away from falling, which can be significant, an advantage for white to keep the game even. So rook to f6 was played, king comes to d3, rook check, king to c2, rook to f2 check, king to b3, rook check, king to c2, rook to f6. That the king to d3 and draw was agreed. This was a decent game from either side of the board. I believe it was worth the draw because there was hardly any inaccuracy from either side. Not much could be said on how better to play the position since it was always fairly balanced all through the game. The second game that I would look at is HeritianaA versus Mathias Bluebam, which was on the board too. Mathias Bluebam was quite a renowned grandmaster from Germany, also on the international scene. So he gets the white pieces and he plays knight f3, and after d5, e3, knight to f6, c5, c4. So quite transposing into some English lines already. So after knight c3, bishop to e7, b3, c6. After bishop to b2, knight from b to d7, d4. Yeah, so we get to see a Cole kind of position. A Cole kind of position. Yeah, not really so, but it's kind of. Yeah, so the development is simple and precise. Not much that is happening. And indeed, it's all a decent game until the video game plans begin. Well, clearly, knight to e5 was played, which is a very nice move. It looks like it hangs a pawn, but no, it doesn't. So if knight takes, pawn takes, you cannot take the pawn because of knight takes. And yeah, you're going to have a wreck of the position, more so when they open up the game. So trying to save the queen carelessly might lose you the game, starting with this move. I think this comes first, and you cannot even take. You'd rather walk away, but then when walking away doesn't help because you can take here. So you have to hold on to the bishop. If you don't hold on to the bishop, well, then you lose the bishop, and that loses the game. If you try anything else funny, then you lose the queen. So the pawn is not up for grabs. So knight to d7 was played, and after f4, f5, pawn takes. We get to see at the center is starting to crumble. Well, you may call some squares weak, like this, since they can't be defended by a pawn, but they're hard to get to, and that's what makes them, well, sensibly strong. Pawn takes, which is not the best option in this position. Well, it wouldn't be any better taking with this other pawn, but you are trying to keep an eye on d5 as long as you are as you try to push your pawn. But this is quite a significant trump in the position, which allows the knight to come to b5, and after queen to b8, knight settles on d4, and that's a square which you can't easily chase it away from. Well, it keeps pressuring the e6 pawn, which can only be defended by the knight. And after bishop to a3, totally freeing up the bishop, rook slides over to c, from c to e7. Let's get to see why. Well, this is not a obviously this loses the rook, the bishop, and the queen is under attack. The knight is also going to fall. So if you save the knight, well, for starters, they could even take here. Then they can win another pawn, and the passed pawn is going to win the game. Yeah. Then the other move to consider, which wouldn't still work, is I think simple enough is even taking the pawn, because you need to capture back. And they chase away the knight, take the pawn. Well, you also have something in your up your sleeve, but it's not enough since your knight doesn't come out of it. So that's how bad it would go. Oh, that's how bad it is getting. So that was a big, big concession in the position. I guess it might have been an oversight. Let's see how the game continues. So after bishop to a3, rook from c to e7, bishop to b5, and we get to see that all the pieces of white are active against the black pieces. So the knight takes pawn, trying a pseudo tactic, which is obviously attacking the bishop, attacking the knight, which would be an in-between move. So knight takes pawn, a very, very nice tactic indeed, attacking this rook, attacking the bishop, and still attacking the other rook. So quite a number of pieces are hanging, I could say, but it's a very nice counter sacrifice. Yeah. So the reason behind this was you couldn't take here because of obviously trying to win this piece, and probably when you take here they can take back, which is enough for them to hold on the game, since they would have a nice bishop and the dark squares, not really strong enough to hold on the game for a win, but it's quite some counterplay. The other move that you would need to consider is obviously knight takes. But after knight takes, then still the bishop can take, and eradicating your light squared bishop kind of eases part of the pressure. So the bishop is now going to sit on c5, which is going to be a very, very nice square. It stops the rook from coming in to the open file, and that is some counterplay that can be sourced out by black in the position. Like I said, not enough to win the game, but still worth considering. So we get to see a nice counter sacrifice, which is knight takes e6. And after bishop takes, knight takes rook, attacking the second rook. And after rook takes f, queen comes to e7. Sorry, queen comes to d3. So queen to d3 is a very, very amazing move in three fronts. Well, it kind of keeps the two pieces under attack. Well, either piece wants to settle on c5, but only one can go there. So if that's the dilemma, then they have to allow to sacrifice one of them. They sacrificed the knight, which was taken, gladly taken, and we get to see this position. So there's still a bishop for a rook, but not enough for the game. As we can see, the bishop maneuvers back to a very nice diagonal, which is along the h1, which is along the h1 AI diagonal. Black tries to continue with some of the play, and it was quite halted after the move with bishop f3, queen e7, and the bishop takes pawn, which was enough for resignation. Reason being, well, they now have a clear passed pawn, not much for you to do about it, and there's nothing actually in terms of counterplay that you can source to continue the game. The threat is also bishop takes b7. winning the rook. So if you take this, then you're clearly down the exchange, and white will win it in a matter of time. These have been the games of Madagascar versus Germany. Keep posted as I bring more of the African countries. Stay well. Vineyard Chess.